I was driving home and I was just like crying uncontrollably, and I started to reach out to God again. Like, I hadn't been talking to God for a while, since COVID. I just cried out to God. I'm like, I don't want to do this. I'm like, God, you're going to hate me. My baby's going to hate me. I hate me. I'm like, I don't know what to do, but I'm like, will you please help me? I'm sorry. I just really repented. And one thing that I learned from this situation is I'm living in sin and I need to get out of this. She's like, hi, Amber. And as soon as she walked in, I said, there's something wrong. And she said, how did you know? And I said, with his brain. And she's like, yeah. And she looked like she had tears in her eyes. Even though I hadn't met her, she was really, really sweet and compassionate. And she had just kind of gone over everything and asked me if I was exposed to cats, toxoplasmosis. She was asking me all different kind of things. And I was just like, I don't know. So when I look back, my child's father, he, it looked like the wind was completely knocked out of him. He was just taking everything. And me, because I work neurology and I work in the medical field, I didn't even like process it that she was talking to me. I was smiling and like joking and laughing. It didn't even hit me. So later on that day, though, I had to go in for an emergency MRI and all kind of other stuff. And then it started to hit me like, oh my God, this is like really happening. So I had the MRI, and so that night I started to Google the, what I looked on my chart to see. They never ever even told me what was wrong. So I looked on my chart and saw ventriculomegaly was one of the diagnoses. And so I looked it up, and I'm like, okay, well, it doesn't seem like this is that bad of a, it doesn't have to be the end. This seems like people survive this without too much of a complication. So I came back the next day with a little bit of hope, like, okay, this isn't that bad. So I had to go for more scans, and then the doctors came in, a bunch more doctors, and they're just like, I said, well, I looked up the diagnosis and it doesn't seem like this is that bad. And they're like, that's one of the diagnoses. He has all this, and this, and and so one of the doctors pulled up my baby scan with the normal baby scan, and he's like, this is your baby, and this is a normal brain. And it was just a complete mess. It was a complete mess. It was fluid all in the brain. There was deformities in the face. I mean, it was just a complete mess. And I asked one of the doctors, now it's probably like six that I've seen at the time, the sixth doctor. I asked the doctor, I said, if this was your baby, what would you do? He said, and I said, off the record. Because essentially these are my colleagues. I worked, in a different department with these people. So I didn't know them, but I worked in the same hospital. And he said, off the record, I wouldn't want my child to live through this. And I said, okay. And, it was a lot of tears. And then they set me up for the abortion initially for August 2nd, but that was my birthday. So I was just like, I can't do it on my birthday. So they pushed it to the 5th. And thank God they did, because I had, because when you're so far along, you don't really have time to, they want to hurry up and do it, because otherwise you have to go to an abortion clinic in another state because of the laws. So they set me up for the 5th, and this was now the 31st. So from 31st to the 1st, I mean, I was just filled with a lot of grief, a lot of tears. I, just cried all the time. On August 3rd, though, I was heading home from work, and the reality of the fact that this was happening in a couple of days, and I'm feeling my baby move, and I'm just so grieved that I just, I was driving home. It's like an hour and a half drive, and I was just like crying uncontrollably, and I started to reach out to God again. Like, I hadn't been talking to God for a while, since COVID. Now it's 2024. And, I just cried out to God. I'm like, I don't want to do this. I'm like, God, you're going to hate me. My baby's going to hate me. I hate me. I'm like, I don't know what to do, but I'm like, will you please help me? I'm like, I'm sorry. I just really repented. And, one thing that I learned from this situation is, I've been living in sin, and I'll repent. I go, oh God, I need to get out of this. But it's when your repentance is without a smile, it's when, God really steps in. And, I repented genuinely, and I'm like, God, I need help. And I knew how to hear from God before, but it'd been like 4 or 5 years that I actually, was reaching out to God. So, at that moment in the car, and I was crying so hard that I missed my exit, and I ended up having to go around. And this is in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm in Texas now, but I was in Milwaukee. But I missed my exit, and I had to go around, so I had to get off at the Chicago exit. And I just remember saying, I know I haven't been listening to you, Lord, but I know you always make a way where I know you're talking to me. And when I missed that exit, I passed a church that I pass quite often, but I never really even looked. It's across the street from the airport, and I never really even bothered to look at it. But God highlighted that church to me, and He's like, "Be there tomorrow." And tomorrow was the 4th, which was Sunday. And I was like, okay. So I got a glimmer of hope at that time. I'm like, okay, I know I heard that. I know I've seen that church. It was like God illuminated it to me. And I said, okay, all right. So my tears started to dry up a little bit. It was still sad, but I just felt like a little glimmer of hope. That next day, I had dragged my child's father with me to the church, and he's a former Jehovah's Witness, so he's like real skeptical of like church and anything. But he went with me, and the whole sermon they talked about women praying for their children, women praying for. It was like he talked about Hannah in the Bible, and the widow that lost her child in the Bible, and just how when you are in a situation that you really need to hear from God, don't be afraid of being mocked. Just, stand on what God says, and, regardless of what anybody else is saying, or, just have faith. So I made up my mind at that moment that I wasn't going to do it, because I felt like, okay, that's enough of God speaking to me that I know that He'll make a way. So that Monday came along, and my child's father is a respiratory therapist. So he, and I work neurology, pediatric neurology, just to give you a little background. So, I know what these kids with these kind of conditions go through, and it's just pure agony. So when the 5th came, which was D-Day, it was supposed to be D-Day, my child's father, he's like, "Are you ready? I'll take you." And I'm not going. And he's like, "What? Are you crazy? Do you know what this is mean for him? Like, he's going to suffer." And, and I was like, "I'm just not going to do it. I believe God. I have faith. And I'm just going to." He's like, "Look, I know you think you have faith, but God is not with people who go through things like this." And that's why my child's name is Emmanuel. And that's why I named him that, because I'm like, no, God is with us. So he like, we got into a big fight, and we broke up that day, because I'm like, I'm choosing my child over you. I'm not gonna do it. And, so he walked out after telling him, like, you can leave if you don't want to believe, that's fine, but you can leave, but I'm going to stand. I said, and I know I probably sounded crazy to him, because I'm like, as surely as the Lord lives. He never heard me talk like that before. And I was just going off. I'm like, as surely as the Lord is alive, my baby will be fine. And so he left, and then I just said, I need to get quiet and I need to pray. So I went to YouTube to put on some music to worship. And as soon as I put on the music, went to YouTube, I saw a commercial, and this commercial was for like these sick children, and they were all like, it was a bunch of sick kids with these small heads and in wheelchairs, and I said, and I got brought back down to reality. I was like, and I remember just sitting there asking God, did I make the right decision? That was my only prayer. Did I make the right decision? And I put on this guy from YouTube, Victor Thompson, I think his name is, like some worship music, and I just sat there and worshiped God and just waited and was still. And I sat there for like an hour, and I didn't hear anything. So I went ahead and got in the shower, and then I heard God. I heard God say, he said, I'm trying not to cry because it was so powerful, but he said, I gave my own son for this very thing. He said, what make you think that I would want a little baby to suffer a gruesome death for a thing that I already paid for? And when he said that, I felt the spirit of grief not walk out, not dissipate. It fled. It fled out of that room, out of the bathroom. It fled, and that was the last. Like, I never cried about it again. I never worried about it again. That was the end of the worrying for that.
Thank you so much for watching this clip. If you want to see the full interview, just click on the video on your screen right now, or check the description below for the link. I'll see you there.